morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Bit cloudy and rainy and drizzly, though warm, 60 degrees out today in the city of Philadelphia. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. We've got a great show for you today. Today we're joined by Dr. Adam Taupin from Anxiety Friendly Improv. It's being produced by Philly Improv Theater. We're also tackling some heavy hitters today, from the global uptick in mental health issues to celebrating community resilience and the power of local entrepreneurship. I'm going to bring Dr. Taupin on screen for us here in a second. I just wanted to, talk about momentarily, we have a lot going on this show as far as local, national, international news. And I was just listening to a report this morning on NPR about kind of the death of local news outlets. And what it is that national news, international news, they're always more sensational. They always deal with more people. It's easier to get more eyeballs on something that affects more people. um it's unfortunate that in the system that we're in, these things are going to happen this way, and especially when you have conglomerates buying up local news outlets and news stations. So get it out of the way right now. Hit like, hit subscribe. It's a free, literally free way to support this local news outlet. Get some more local news in front of local eyeballs, especially if you're from the city of Philadelphia. I'm also starting a little Facebook page, group, whatever you want to call it, micropreneur social media. I forget exactly what I called it. Philadelphia Micropreneurs Social Media Networking Group. That is what I called it. And you can look that up on Facebook. If you are a micropreneur, that's somebody with like less than 5 full-time employees, you don't have that much throw. You don't have that much reach. Get together with a bunch of other micropreneurs, like and subscribe to each other's channels. And then, that networking in and of itself will increase your reach, and support local businesses and support local folks. With that being said, I'm going to bring Dr. Adam up on screen. Welcome, Adam. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Sure. As you said, I'm Dr. Adam Taupin, he, him pronouns. I'm a psychologist with a practice in Center City, Philadelphia, focusing on work with mainly folks 18 and older, with depression issues, anxiety issues, but then also focusing on neurodiversity and especially diagnoses of autism spectrum disorder. And the last couple of years, I started using improv techniques in my practice, sort of based off of my own classes that I've taken probably 12 years now, many of them at Philly Improv Theater, which is now where I teach. And so it's been sort of an exciting passion project thing to get this anxiety class and also different iterations, especially a class with folks on the spectrum. So to infuse improv into sort of the mental health repertoire of folks in the community at large. So
Awesome. What would you say has been your biggest takeaway in anxiety, depression, the things that you treat, Like with the current international national climate, especially as it regards, COVID. What did COVID do? What did lockdowns do to affect mental health?
That's a great question. I think I wanted to start with some blessings in disguise after you mentioned that silver linings, and but I mean, I guess
I mean,
first and
we'll
foremost,
get to blessings in disguise. Don't get me wrong. We'll cover them, but
sure, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, it was a trauma that we all sustained, and are now sort of coming out of and trying to figure out life post COVID. So anxiety and depression went way up, and the need for mental health care went way up, and there's sort of not enough clinicians, which includes psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, just not enough to meet the demand.
so,
um,
just momentarily on that, this is an interesting problem to me, and one close to me, just because I recently, recently was diagnosed with sleep apnea, severe sleep apnea, and even that, like we all, for those of us in our 30s, 40s, 50s, we all lived through the era of Republicans arguing against socialized medicine because it would lead to enormous wait times to be seen by a doctor. You'd sit for months with a condition. Obstructive sleep apnea is a deadly condition, quite literally. There's famous people who have literally died in their sleep because they had obstructive sleep apnea and weren't using a machine prescribed to them. Um, it took me nearly 9 months to see to get the prescribed treatment started, and even that doesn't work right yet, and there's a process obviously, but um where did this lack where does this lack of clinicians, care providers, where does it come from? Like, why I'm living in Philadelphia, like, one of the largest cities in the country. You'd think I could see somebody within 9 months.
Right. Well, and especially with a chronic condition, which, sleep apnea obviously relates to mental health, and many mental health conditions are chronic. And so it's not like, and I can maybe speak only for the mental health stuff, but it's not like you're going to the doctor for a checkup every now and then. It's, you know, standard practice is weekly therapy. Um, and I mean, I think if the world was a friendlier place, maybe we wouldn't need as many therapists. You know, it sucks. I mean, I was trying to get my own therapy during. Um, I could go into stories about that, but my own therapy during the beginning of the pandemic, and while also being provider, and not being able to find my own therapist in network. Uh, and so I said, to I had I guess it's fine for me to say I had Independence Blue Cross insurance, so I couldn't find anybody, and I also was at the same time as a therapist trying to get paneled on on this insurance company. Um, and I could not get paneled because they told me, "Oh, you're saturated with providers in your particular area, so no more providers." I said, "Well, I'm a potential patient, and I can't find anybody." Everybody's
Yeah, when was the last time you guys checked on that number, right?
right.
Yeah.
So I pushed and pushed, and finally I became a provider on the network. I was paneled. So I don't know for somebody trying right now to become a new provider if they would say, if they've sort of reworked that since COVID, and like hopefully, I mean, you can go on about insurance companies, and I don't want to do that, but because insurance helps a lot of people, and there are too many, I think, clinicians that go without insurance and charge exorbitant rates. So I think that's actually a bigger problem, um, as far as I see it. But yeah, that's a little anecdote
Do you
to
think
maybe
a
bring home the
universal
point.
healthcare kind of thing might help, or do you think it just be more of the same kind of mess?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think that it sounds like a good idea, but I don't know. I mean, I'm for it, but in terms of my politics, I'm for it, but I don't know how it would actually work.
Yeah, I wonder that myself, looking at examples like the UK and Canada. I do have friends in both countries, and I don't know that it works 100% of the time, especially if there's people pushing back against it. But much like anything else, you have to have good participation in order to make a system work. At any rate, back on to COVID and anxiety and depression. Worldwide, the World Health Organization noted a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression worldwide.
Mm.
Um, what you know what have you seen that links COVID to this like growth in depression, and also what are you using? How are you using your practice to treat that? Like what are there any direct links between like the COVID increase in anxiety, depression, and using your improv techniques to treat them?
Well, I mean, I think anecdotally, what I've seen is more worry about health and health anxiety, and that can lead to depression too, especially if there's this feeling of hopelessness in terms of alleviating symptoms. Um, I think folks who were already prone to anxiety had it ramped up because all of a sudden, especially in the beginning of COVID, there's this like sense of, oh, we don't know what COVID is exactly, so let's wipe off our mail and do all the things we need to do. So it's sort of increasing hypervigilance, and that leads to heightened anxiety. And again, if left untreated, um, it that's what ends up causing depression. Anxiety and depression sort of go hand in hand, and sort of system burnout with being hyper vigilant about all the time, all the things can then
As somebody
leave the
who
system
had
shut down.
or has had insomnia his whole life, I can tell you the hypervigilance,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely kicked up during COVID. Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me too. It's scary, and I think we all have sort of our own places mental health wise that we go. It's like, oh gosh, I'm worried specifically about getting COVID, and other times it's just like there's heightened anxiety around, and it moves in our particular flavor of a mental health issue.
Yeah, I
um
definitely I, I definitely noticed like an uptick in my personal like worries about, like I have a 2-year-old in daycare, and so now like anytime there's like an illness thing, I'm like hyper researching the illness and
yeah,
how it spreads and what its possible negative consequences can be. And whereas I might not have even like really cared about getting the flu vaccine pre-COVID. Right?
right, I hear that. Yeah, no doubt. The idea of vaccines for me has sort of been like, okay, yeah, we got to do this.
Some just like how do you use the improv to access the route to therapy for this?
Well, in general, improv is great because it's social. And during the pandemic, obviously, it was tough for the in person stuff, but there were plenty of opportunities over Zoom to do improv. I took a few classes and workshops, and it helped immensely. So not only, it's like the social stuff that's not perfect because it's over Zoom, but being silly and accessing different characters. We're encouraged to move around the space of our apartments, and it helped a lot. I mean, for the couple hours of the class, it's like, okay, I'm in a sort of different headspace and sort of intentional escapism. Um, so then for me, since then, I mean, it's only shown me more the power of improv. Um, so in my one-to-one interactions with clients in my office, I'll use humor. I will sort of make sure to follow the client's own um, efforts for humor, try to join that, listen. And that's really at the heart of improv, is being a good listener, uh, not having to one up somebody with humor and be witty, but to listen. And if you know a little bit about improv, yes and is the sort of big picture philosophy. Um, and so as a therapist, I do that all the time: is accept and build, join. And so if there is a moment of humor, of spontaneous humor, especially by the by the client, then I'm like, okay, let's capitalize on this. And I think because of my training as an improviser, I'm skilled enough to then also insert my own humor and build on that. Um, and I just think we need moments of joy in therapy too. I mean, therapy is a serious thing. We're talking about serious conditions and dark thoughts, but um, the insertion of joy through the sessions is really key. Um, so hopefully that answers your question a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit.
No, absolutely. I have also a question from the audience. Catherine Wild asked, is the shift from having extra time and space during COVID lockdowns to do things back to a normal speed a factor in mental health in your experience?
Um, well, that's a good question. I mean, because I think in some ways normal speed has changed because telehealth and Zoom calls are sort of more a part of our way of being. Um, so, for instance, I do a hybrid situation for my practice. I see maybe half and half clients in person versus Zoom, and some do both Zoom and in person. Um, and there's definitely a difference in sort of speed and just way of being with those two particular media. Um, and I think they both have their benefits for therapy. For a lot of people, leaving the house initially is really challenging. The idea of going into a waiting room, um, making eye contact with a professional in that type of setting is sort of scary. So um, I think that telehealth has been wonderful for bringing people to therapy that may have not been comfortable. Um, but then I do think having in person sessions is so key as well.
I
And
think Catherine's question more comes from a space of, and I know Catherine, so I'm guessing this is her framing. Um, More of like the back to work, back to office kind of
oh, sure,
shift. Like the speed of, having to spend, 10, 15 to minutes to 45 minutes commuting and then, having your day locked into 8 to 6 and then, whereas during COVID, during the lockdowns especially, like I mean, even me myself, I had tons more time to practice activism, to
mm,
practice, social care, and I don't know where that time went, to be honest.
right. That's a good point. And there's, I guess, a little silver lining ish stuff about some lessons that hopefully we learned and may or may not be able to continue to apply um, since that time. But yeah, I mean, the slower pace it was wonderful in a lot of ways, and we snap right back to the high pace stuff, especially in a city like this. And I think that has made it hard for especially folks who are overwhelmed by lots of stimuli to sort of shift back. That's where the neurodiversity stuff and autism spectrum stuff comes in. But for everybody, it's like, oh, now we have to snap back to this like fast paced environment, and yeah, I mean it.
I mean, is it
Yeah,
really? And then I guess the grander question is it really necessary? Obviously, we made it through COVID. Some people would say, you know, the support that the government gave during the COVID pandemic is tied to the um, inflation that we're seeing now. I would say it's just profiteering, but I don't
mm,
I don't know who's right. I guess if we look at it in 50, 100 years, we'll probably figure out one of us is right. But what like is I mean I've been saying that like some of this return to office, the increasing of the pace, the pulling back of social support, all is continuing kind of. Maybe we would have seen a drop off in anxiety and depression by now, due to the lack of social interaction during COVID. But now we have other sources of anxiety and depression that just kind of dovetail right into the
mhm,
end
mhm.
of the previous ones that we got rid of.
Right, right. Yeah, it's terrible. The system is terrible in in many ways, and I mean, many workplaces have blurbs on their website about the importance of self care and mental health now, and uh, it's all talk. I mean, a lot of it, right? I don't want to come across too cynical, especially as a therapist. Like my job is to carry hope, um, and I really do fancy myself a hopeful person. Um, but but yeah, the system sucks, and it's important to sort of call that for what it is, and that's a major thing that I talk about in my therapy is that like yes, you may have depression, you may have anxiety, and these are disorders and useful to label them that way, but this is also a direct reflection of the environment that you're in and the systems and the hierarchies that have affected us since
So
we
I'm
were
not I'm
born.
not I'm not you know I'm not clinically depressed, but everybody I'm not clinically depressed to say that I feel this too. Like this is something everybody is experiencing.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, and it's hard to know like what's the baseline of like feeling quote unquote normal, and what is regular human sadness, and when is it like suffering that's untenable, and these are big philosophical questions, but it's in the past 5 years especially, it's easy to see how you know a lot of people with solid values have been screwed, so that screws with mental health.
I want to just briefly talk momentarily. You are on promoting your show at Anxiety Friendly Improv by Philly Improv Theater. Where can people see Anxiety Friendly Improv being produced by Philly Improv Theater featuring you?
Well, so it's a class, and the class is at Philly Improv Theater. You can sign up on phillyimprovtheater.com. It starts at the end of March, runs through for 8 weeks, and there is a performance at the end. So after the 8 weeks, folks get a chance to be on stage. We are at the Arden Theater, which is a great new spot for Philly Improv Theater. over the last year or so, and at the Hamilton Family Center building there. And we use their stage for the show, which is sort of a wonderful, empowering piece to culminate the class.
Awesome. The I wanted to transition into local news a little bit. A couple of I want to go to a couple things. I know on the outline I'm only talking about Win-Win Coffee, but I also wanted to talk briefly about the new mayor. Mayor Parker recently issued a statement that she wants to see everyone back to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, that works in Center City. This may be a bit of a self-serving statement on behalf of the Parker administration, since Philadelphia gets a vast majority of its money from basically income tax that we charge to anybody who works or works for a company based in Philadelphia. Um, what like, do you think that as a clinician, do you think that there's a benefit to like all these calls to return to work, to return to the office, or is like a lot of the more cynical amongst us progressives will say that it's just landlords realizing that their property is valueless unless we're all in it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that part of it for sure. I don't think the traditional 5 days in the office thing is good for mental health, and I think we've learned that lesson, and that that would be silly not to apply it. Um, I'm in the fortunate position now where I started my practice in the pandemic, and I'm in the fortunate position to work for myself. And I switched. I first worked 6 days a week, um, and then I'm down to 4 days a week, and it's a huge difference for my mental health. And I'm in the office 2 days a week, and then I work from home 2 days a week. Um, and Yeah, I know that's not feasible for everyone, but it's certainly been a
I
really.
mean, as a freelance, I've been a freelancer my whole life, so I don't often relate to the problems of office workers, other than like my time. I was a cube farmer in a previous career, and spent my 5 days a week in an office in Delaware, in New Jersey, in Philadelphia. Anyway, and to know that that was really bad for. So I know that that was bad for my personal mental health. I know that caused me to be a bad person to the people around me. Like, and I didn't come to this realization by therapy or by just deciding it myself. I just realized it a few years after I left, an office work environment. That all of a sudden I wasn't, like having fights with my girlfriend, or being mad at my cat for, like pooping outside the litter box. I was just like, you pooped outside the litter box. What's going on? And my whole demeanor changed after I left office work. I don't know if that's just a me thing, or if that's like a general person thing. Like, are there people geared towards office work, towards the way we've created this kind of office environment?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I mean, I think about that personally, and I haven't worked the traditional office job, and I sort of wonder about how things. This is maybe a provocative statement, but how it's not soul crushing for everybody who goes to a traditional office job, and is in a cubicle, etc. I mean, that's way overgeneralizing, but Um, yeah, I what was the specific question there? I'm sorry.
Is it? Do you think there are people that are geared towards kind of this environment that's been created?
Uh, well, I would imagine so. I'd imagine it sort of uh, creates folks or creates behaviors that folks just sort of inevitably lean into. And I can't help but think of like Office Space, for
Right.
instance, the like classic movie where they end up smashing the copier and burning the place down in the end. You know,
Well, and that kind of is where my question comes from. Like, is it universally a negative, or are there people that are just like, oh no, this is great. I love working in a cubicle every day.
possibly. I mean, look, to go to the flip side of the coin, I sometimes think about how my job is really nebulous in terms of measuring outcomes. It's so gray, and some days I'm like, how do I know if I did a good job? Um, so
I
there's something about
Dude, I'm
like
an artist. Like, you talk
right,
about nebulous. Like, even when I'm working for, like, as an advertising artist, it's, like, we have no metrics. We have no, like, way of
right,
telling, like, did that ad campaign do anything? I don't know. Did it?
right, totally. And I'm sure many jobs can, say the same thing. But yeah, there's something about like if there was some quantifiable data, like I am in awe of coders, and I would say that that's certainly a quote unquote office job that like now is sort of people lean into those behaviors because they're reinforced, and it's amazing to me the fact that people can focus long enough to pull off amazing code, and yeah, maybe we're being trained more that way. So yeah, and there's that. I guess the point I was getting at. There's the enviable part of that for me because there's like, oh, look at this problem I solved today. Um, that's a job well done. And there's also creativity in coding too. So it's not like it's not like you're trained to be just a lemming following orders or whatever. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about a regular office job to really answer that question with any credibility, but those are my thoughts.
Um, Other local news: Win-Win Coffee in Kensington is a black-owned coffee roasting company, and they're building a network across the African diaspora to foster black wealth through importing and roasting coffee and selling coffee. I think personally, this is a coffee break chat. I'm personally all for coffee anytime, anywhere. I think this is a fascinating idea. Um, how does kind of I was talking. All right, so I'm sorry for all the weird pauses here. I haven't really formed this in my mind yet. I was talking the other day with some folks about um, the conflict in Israel and Palestine, the ways in which um, Israeli authorities, especially hardline right wing Israeli authorities, are responding to any form of protest having to do with the conflict and relating it to black oppression and the black experience. Because it was related to that by the person I was talking with, they were saying, a lot of the hard line comes from people of the Jewish faith and culture never having a homeland, being kicked out of multiple homelands, being, you know, suffering existentially for generations. Fair. However, the black experience is exactly that as well. We black people have suffered existentially for generations, don't have a homeland. Um, I wonder if as a mental health person, if you see the roots of mental health in how the social aspect of our lives is treated. So like by um, there are statistics that say mental health is less cared for in the Black community. I don't know the statistics around mental health in the Jewish community. Post October 7th or during the current conflict. I would assume that mental health is less well right now in the Jewish community. Where how do these things tie in together? Like, what is the avenue for a less cared for community leading to individual mental health outcomes?
Well, good question and loaded question for sure. I will say, sort of as I alluded to before, that systems of oppression and speaking on systems of oppression feels necessary in therapy. I mean, it's sort of part of feminist approach to therapy, which certainly not everybody uses as part of their technique, but I do. Um, and one of the facts is, unfortunately, since this um, recent uh, mess in Gaza, um, there's been more hate, across the board for minority status folks. I'm a Jewish person, and I can't help but think of anti-Semitism as part of the reality, the implicit reality, um, and now seeing more overt notions, more overt pieces. I can't think of a great word for it. But same for Muslims, of course. And it's hard to sort of untie pieces of identity with this, especially because we have all these cross sections of identity that intersect within one person. But it's been hard as a clinician, particularly as a Jewish clinician, to know how to respond when folks bring up um, the particular pieces of the um, conflict in Gaza. Uh, Even in the way I try to formulate words, conflict, mess. Do I say Gaza? Do I say Middle East? Do I say Israel? What?
Sure. I mean, I've been as somebody who's even just commenting on society in the current moment. I have to consider, like, I play to what I see as reality? Do I play a middle ground to ameliorate, like any feelings that might cause in my audience or my interview subjects?
Right, right.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a better word for it, and then genocide. I don't. I just like, and conflict doesn't fit. It's not really a conflict anymore, like it was to start with. Um, it's not a war because there aren't like two armies facing off against each other. And the numbers of people trying to continue and inflame the situation are so small compared with the populations that we're talking about, that it's just like it would be insanity to call it anything really other than a bunch of people who should just be ejected from all social interaction with anybody.
Mm.
Like the I mean, you're talking about like probably 2-3% of people who even care, who don't want to get along, like, and then the rest of the majority of people in both Gaza and Israel just want to live. Like, I mean, it's just like here, you just want to go to your house, go maybe to work, go to the park with your kid, see them grow up, and anything that stops that isn't really interesting to most people. Like, and that's logical. I mean, that's logical from a both a like a mental health and a evolutionary perspective. Like, evolutionarily, why I'm not gonna care why you're trying to make me hate this other person if I can live next to them and still have access to the resources I
Mm.
need. I'm not going to just randomly jump into a conflict with somebody because I don't agree with their religion. Um, and I would say that that's most people anywhere. I may be wrong, but the polling seems to, and statistical studies seem to bear that out. Um, but I mean that uh, word choice. We got onto this because of word choice. I don't know. I don't know how you solve word choice.
I know. Well, and it's like something that is almost more comfortable for me to zoom out and talk about word choice as opposed, and like the weaponization of words, even as opposed to like the actual weapons that are flying and killing a bunch of people. So, um, it's we're lucky that we're safe here. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how safe we are, but I mean, there's insurrection here. There's a small percentage of the population that's angling towards a civil war. Even here in the
Fair,
United
yeah.
States,
Psychological safety is
yeah.
too is yeah. No, I hear that.
And I don't know, maybe what we've been talking about has to do with that. Maybe the increased anxiety. I think the increased anxiety and depression amongst the global population has a lot to do with the uptick in kind of fascist nationalistic traction in the governments around the world. Um, I, I know that there's some psychological mechanism to that, like people as they get more afraid of their personal security, that they seek out a stronger, more authoritarian system of leadership. But I don't know specifically what that mechanism is, but
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's nice to be able to look with empathy, and I think that's probably part of what you're doing there, around why people might get sort of sucked into the authoritarian ideals. And Yeah, it's another sort of fortunate position to be in, to have the wherewithal to and education to empathize like that.
But there is this other way of going about it, the way that the folks at Win Win are going about it, which is to seek out people who are in your same predicament or suffering from the same problems, and try and work with them to advance your social group as a whole. Um, how do we leverage that? How do we access that? How do we make more people access that?
Boy, I mean, now we're getting into a realm that I lack expertise on. What I will say is, at maybe this is related. I hope it is. As a practitioner, I self disclose my own issues with depression, um, and I think that perhaps that's useful in breaking down some hierarchies. And looking at like, hey, even though like I'm part of the powers at be because I'm consultant for or I'm contracted by the insurance companies, um, et cetera. Um, maybe I can do my small part in sort of decreasing the hierarchical implications. So I'm not sure if that's related. Maybe that's just me skirting around the topic
No,
I'm
no,
uncomfortable
I
with.
think that's related. I think I just I wonder if there is a bigger access, a bigger way to um, socialize the problems that we have. You know, I know you work on the kind of individual space, um, and I just wonder if there's a way to socialize and like during the beginning of COVID, we socialized the individual experience and way of reacting to a deadly virus. We were talking about silver linings earlier. One of the silver linings is everybody was reminded, to wash their hands and you know seek medical care early, like pay attention to their bodies, be self-aware. All of these good things, these silver linings came from, the socialization of the problem. Like, we were all seeking a solution, um, and feeding back into our social circles what's working, what's not working, what how do we all interact with this thing, um, that's killing our population. So I wonder how we leverage that same thing in situations like this. Obviously, like the folks at Win Coffee Bar are doing it. They're leveraging the fact that there's a population of Black people who have we all have our own goals. We're all individuals, but because they recognize the struggles that we've all had as individuals, they're applying a social solution and trying to network with all of those folks that have the same social background, and engineer a solution that is social, not individual. Um, how do I wonder if there is a mechanism to do that. At any rate, going in the opposite direction, I did want to touch on the two recent protest actions by people who self-immolated in front of Israeli uh, um, uh, what do you call it? Sorry, I need the word and I can't find it. Um, Embassies, Israeli embassies in DC and Atlanta. Um, this I don't want to talk about those specific incidents so much as relate this back to mental health, and individual mental health, individual care. There's a great story that NPR did actually in 2013 about people who protest through self-immolation. And so, obviously, long before the current conflict, this tactic of speaking out has been used. Where does one, how does, is this a disconnect between like a social person and an individual person, or is this a social way of speaking out? Is somebody committing this act of self harm uh, in some way, in an attempt to communicate a social position? How do those go together from the perspective of a clinician?
I think I'm losing you a little bit with that question. Could you
So,
repeat?
sure. So, like, obviously, like any act of self-harm is very self-centered. Um we've always seen that, like, and that, I think that's like the common perspective of it. It might not be the psychological perspective on it. I know I've read something about, like self-harm being related to like a biological loop where you're actually taking care of your community. Um but how does like an act of self-harm become an act of expression in your society? Like how does one relate those two in a psychological perspective, like in an individual perspective? Where do you bridge that self act with, like your society?
Hmm. Yeah, I think maybe it relates to sort of the theoretical notions in my practice. Again, with feminist theory, sort of there's this notion that like the personal is political.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I sort of think of that as a clinician, like the professional is political. Um, and yeah, I mean, I generally try to zoom out with clients and with myself and model that for the clients on sort of the implications of behavior. um Sort of makes me think of like big picture self-harm and um self-harm, I guess, in terms of like psychologically self-harm. The definitions are pretty different, in terms of cutting and self-mutilation and that sort of thing, but maybe that overlaps with what you're talking about. um anyway, it's that I think that's probably why I was having difficulty
Mm.
comprehending the question. um but yeah, I think it's important to sort of contextualize behavior and sort of understand the person's motivations and intentions without judgment, right? I mean, it's easy for a psychologist to sort of worry about malevolent intentions that are unsaid, and that there's manipulation going on that's not um, you know
I would just think like you're to relate it back to improv and using improv in psychology. um you're socializing, your practice is socializing the self-care, right? Like you're
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think part of the reason that I'm doing this is to give more access to folks. um if I can uh help a group of people for an hour instead of one person for an hour, uh maybe I'm making more of a difference.
I
And
mean, I've
also,
I've said it many times on the show, but I also think like, just giving the arts in general gives people an access pathway to express themselves, which
yes.
all of these things that bottle up and turn into self-harm, depression, anxiety. I think that a lot of people could do a lot better for themselves if they just learned how to express themselves.
Yes, right. I'm glad you bring that up. It's so true. And I think we can't help but when we're in an improv class and we are prompted to be in character or to express emotion, to like finally have a catharsis for what we've been bottling up, which is exactly how we have anxiety and depression. And so there's this encouragement for a social catharsis in a playful way, in a safe way. Um, there's at Philly Improv Theater, there's this term that I love, that Kelly Jennings brought to the forefront. She's the director of the Improv Theater, brave space.
Hmm.
So this idea that you know we're 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 moving into space and challenging ourselves in a classically like social exposure exercise, which is sort of the psychological way of thinking of you will feel some mild discomfort here. Um, but social but improv is all about having each other's backs, and there's processing and giving notes, and which is part of processing. And yeah, it's just a really amazing art form for self-expression, going back to your initial point. And it just helps. And from personal experience, I can say it helps a lot, especially with just straight up social exposure for social anxiety.
Right. I
So
want to talk briefly about some last 2 minutes here. So I wanted to talk briefly about something that we've been talking about a bit over the course of the last few episodes. I'm kind of homing in on like the root of kind of change, the root of social change that at least here locally in Philadelphia we could take towards making things a little bit better for a larger population. And in my opinion, this is in no way a professional opinion, but is supported by just what I've researched and talked with, found out on my own. That's really housing security is where we kind of need to start. Um, the In 2020, activists for unhoused people took over and protested at the park on the end of the Avenue of the Arts, or sorry, the Ben Franklin Parkway, and there was a homeless encampment there. Um, and in order to resolve that in a way that was amenable to the city itself and the especially the neighbors of that park, the city promised to give a Philadelphia Community Land Trust organization 150, or excuse me, 50 vacant homes. There were there was a timeline set. The direct action was 6 months, and then there was a timeline of about a year set to form the land trust and turn over the homes. So far, none of the promised properties have been turned over, even though the land trust has been set up and put in place. Is is this a psychological tactic on the part of the city? Am I right? Is housing an important thing towards individual mental health? Does social welfare, the social growth of a city or nation, depend on individual mental health? I know these are a lot of questions to answer in really short period, but
oh, that's
go.
okay. um, I mean, it makes me think about hierarchy of needs, which is like I guess a pretty old psychological concept. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is something I bring up, especially more recently, which is we need safety, and feelings of psychological safety and physical safety, sort of as a foundation of this pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is self-actualization, and towards the middle are more interpersonal needs, social needs. And so, yes, so housing is so important, and all of the policies that affect housing are, at work in sort of dictating psychological safety for the individual, whether it's in or out of their conscious awareness. I often wonder how well versed I should be in these policies, and it's sort of easy for me to dissociate from the you know the horrors of these things, and I think it helps to be on a podcast like this, to be sort of challenge myself to be more well informed. Um, but I certainly understand, I guess, in terms of big picture, how this affects folks, and um, as I mentioned, I try to apply that into my work. So
All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap up the show, but thank you so much for joining us today. Plug your classes one more time.
sure.
And if you have any last thoughts, the floor is yours. So take as long or as short as you need. And yeah, where can folks participate in your anxiety improv classes?
Yes. PhillyImprovTheater.com has, as I mentioned, we moved to the Art and Theater, and there are many class options. So not just the anxiety class, but 101 class, which starts you off in a curriculum through 401. We have workshops. We have one of the newer ones is a clowning based workshop, which I intend to try myself. There's Shakespeare improv workshop, where you sort of learn to speak in iambic pentameter to a degree, and learn to improvise in that style. And Yeah, so there's many offerings. But I think with all of them, you'll find that you'll become a better listener. Your mental health will improve by a function of that, by being a better listener, and inclined to form relationships with other people and build something together, which is not something that we generally do, or are taught to do in the world at large nowadays. We're constantly thinking of the next thing to say, and our point. I know I've done it here in this interview. It's hard not to. We're wired for it, but it's a space specifically geared for building something together, for co-created space, and it's so lovely. And I hope everybody does it, at least takes one improv 101 class. I sort of oversell it to my clients sometimes, I think, but that's because I've had all these personal benefits from it. So yeah, take improv. It's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you joining us today. As I said, um, feel free to come back anytime and let me know if you have any topics you want to talk about in specific.
Sure.
And feel free to stick around. I'm gonna if you'd like to talk more after the show, and I'm going to switch it to a one up of me and outro the show.
Thank you, James. I do have a client in the next hour, so I will catch you another time. But I
Awesome.
so appreciate you having me on. This has been a great
No,
experience.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. And thank you to you guys, the audience, for tuning in every week. I really appreciate your time and attention. Today, we've been talking about mental health and the importance of society's interaction with the individual in achieving good mental health. Uh, Maybe how mental health outcomes can be a barometer for health from of society in general. I don't know. I think they can. Um, from improvisation as a form of healing to the power of collective economic initiatives and the deep significance of protest, we can see people's speaking out and seeking change. Will we be able to affect that change? I don't know. I hope so. I hope that if anything, from today, you see yourself in some of these conversations, and maybe it triggered a thought process in you. Could I do this a different way? Maybe not. I don't know. What have you. A special thank you to Dr. Adam Taupin for joining us. The conversation doesn't end here. Let's keep talking, keep listening, and keep pushing for a better tomorrow. Tune in next week. Our guest will be Newton Buchanan talking about Fun Home, being produced by New Light Theater. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. Have a good one.